Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the opinions of melee players, and don't freak out, this is still an ultimate video here, I can prove it to you. There's the tier list, don't leave. But as most of you know, Zane has recently been doing an ultimate, I guess talks would be the correct word for it, where he plays the game for 90 days. That's got a lot of melee eyes on ultimate, which I appreciate, so shouts to Zane for that, to the point where you have Cody making him ultimate tier list, and this is something that is very important to understand. Day 1 tier list based off absolutely nothing but vibes and how much complaining I've seen from alt players, which is honestly a great metric because they do it a lot. You got a lot of information to go off there. So we're not going to be super critical about Cody's tier list because he doesn't have any idea where he's putting the characters. It's literally just up vibes, but I wanted to look at it regardless because straight up, I just haven't really talked about a tier list in a long time, and most of the characters I like to talk about are on funky spots. So let's get into it. And these bottom 3 tiers, I can't give you a ton of analysis, so we're just going to go through them really quick. You have the Die tier. I don't know why he doesn't like these characters. I don't know what DK did to him. I think DK is pretty cool, but moving on, you have the clones. They're clones. And then you finally have the BS Dogwater characters meant to cheese melee players with infinite specials. And this is a really fun tier to look at because you've got some actual garbage characters in here. You got characters like Isabel, you have characters like Piranha Plant, but then you have characters like Snake, Sora, Min, Pac-Man, even Hero at this point I would regard pretty highly in the game, and their specials are ridiculously good. So Cody Schwab, do not worry, it's not just the melee players who are getting cheesed out by the specials, it is everyone. Moving on to the D tier, well, first you have the Plup tier, but I don't have anything to dispute in this tier because they do look pretty cool, and Plup is playing those characters. Mega Man is also just kind of cool in general, but starting off with the D tier, this one is honestly pretty solid, except for obviously this really big red flag, which is going to be Bayonetta, but I can excuse him for putting Bayo this low. I mean, we all did it when the game first came out. It just takes people a little bit of time to realize how good of a character Bayonetta actually is, and also, I feel like Bayo is a character that people would complain about a lot because she has a really hard time killing. That feels like that's the main thing people complain about, but that's just because the Bayo players are, like, bad at this game. If you watch someone like Tama P play the game, Bayo is killing you at, like, sub 80 pretty much every single stock. And if you look at someone like Lima play the game, they might live a little bit longer to, like, 150, even 200%. But that's because Lima is camping you on the other side of the stage and just only getting guaranteed punishes where he's slowly racking up your percent. That's one of the really nice things about Bayonetta. And she's a character where she pretty much never has to force the narrative. So it's okay if you have this really high percent, you have a ton of rage, because I'm just going to wait for my opening, I'm going to kill you. And even if that takes a bunch of time, I take 90%. I deal 50, 60% of half my moves when you come off the Halo platform, so it really isn't that big of a deal. Bayonetta is a character that's had a ton of resurgence in the late state of the game. I guess it's not really a resurgence, maybe if you want to compare it to Smash 4, but the rest of this characters in this D tier, absolutely justified. Ganon, this is where I would put him on a tier list. D3, I would also regard him as the second worst character in the game at this point, and then K-Rool, he probably shouldn't be that low, but he's not, like, good, so whatever. Moving on to the C tier, and I will say it's kind of difficult to be critical about Ultimate tier list in this part of the tier list just because Simon Belmont, I don't think he's a very good character. I could see him being all the way at the top of the C tier, but at the end of the day, he's in the right place. Who cares? Even if there's a 10 character difference or even more than that, I'm not really going to be critical about that. Now, there are 3 characters in this tier that I do think should be moved out of it, and the first one is going to be Little Mac. He definitely belongs in that D tier, but if you've never personally platform camped Little Mac or edge guarded him at 0%, I could see why you would regard this character not fairly high, but higher than he would normally be, because on the ground the character is an absolute menace. You have super armor on all of your smash stacks, so if you call someone out and you're right, you are just going to win that trade pretty much every single time. You also have amazing frame data on your normals. Your normals are also just incredibly. Character is incredibly nimble as well. KO Punch is a great X factor. It's a command grab that kills people at like 30%. Sign me up. But again, you could just circle camp him. You can platform camp him. You can camp him in literally any way you want, even with the character being that fast, because he really is only playing on one dimension, which is going to be the ground. But in theory, I do think Little Mac is a lot better than he is, practice. The next character that I want to talk about is Byleth, and this isn't a character that I would move massively, probably just up to the B tier, but again, I want to mention all the characters that I would actually shift out of their tier, and Byleth is one of them. The character has some really solid disjoints. You're hitting like a truck. You have an amazing advantage state as well with that up air, which can be confirmed into Nair is still an incredibly good move. People just aren't going to give you that free landing hitbox anymore, which is unironically why Byleth went from like an A tier character to being a B tier, potentially C tier character. The best melee player in the world seems to think so, and there are definitely weaknesses of Byleth. The main one is going to be coming in from her mobility, but she just kind of makes up for it with those really nice disjoints, and especially with that kill power. The X factor of the character is also incredible, and the final one in this C tier that I want to give full detail to is going to be Zelda, because I think Zelda should be all the way in this D tier. Now, This is very harsh. I just think Zelda is absolute garbage. And there's some good things about the character. For example, her killing is actually quite good. You have forward air and back air being super strong. Up air as well. I mean, pretty much all of her aerials are crazy strong if you are able to hit them, which is a pretty big if your character doesn't have an easy solution to deal with the knight, like a projectile just to make Zelda break her focus, or maybe they just can't get around it because of the way that their jump works, really, really difficult to deal with. If your character can deal with the knight, which is most of them, especially if you're competent, then the character is just significantly worse. You're taking out her pretty much only neutral tool and making it obsolete, which is very, very difficult. There are some things that you can do with Zelda. It's Smash Ultimate. You can make a run with any character in this game, but I do think that she would be in the D tier. And the final character that I want to talk about is going to be Mii Gunner, and I would move Mii Gunner up to the B tier, but it's not because Mii Gunner is really good, it's just because there's a handful of characters in the B tier who I'm very confident are worse than Mii Gunner, but even without those characters existing, I would easily boost Mii Gunner to the top of this C tier. They're essentially just a diet Samus, and Samus is really good, so even though it's not the real deal, you still have the basic parts of the game plan, which are really strong. Charge Shot's amazing, super solid ledge trapping, you got these really nice stations that even Samus doesn't have. But overall, the character just gets power crept by a majority of the things in this cast, and she can get overwhelmed as well if you are a character with decent mobility. So I would move Mii Gunner up slightly, top of the C tier. Nothing drastic, but I did want to point it out. Actually, last thing I want to say before we move on to the B tier is that I would move Ike down to the D tier as well. I am not an Ike believer at all. I think this character is absolute garbage. If you know how to deal with Nair, you're going to beat pretty much every Ike player. And if you know how to parry Nair perfectly, then you will beat every Ike player, even the best one in the world, because that's just the character's game plan. There's no other way to really get your combo started. And before I hear in the comments, yes, you can grab, you can down, so it is possible. But Nair is just such an important tool in his kit that if you can deal with it, he's just really, really bad. And also the character is super slow and has a garbage recovery. Moving on to the B tier, and this is potentially the trickiest tier in the entire tier list, just because a lot of characters have arguments for being in here, but I wouldn't necessarily put them in here. Starting off with the first character, which is going to be Mewtwo. I have no faith in this character. I think Mewtwo is actually really bad. You're just such a massive hitbox character while being incredibly light. It makes you really inconsistent, and that's honestly the really big issue that I have with Mewtwo. It's not even Mewtwo himself, because Mewtwo's kit is decent. You have a Shadow Ball, which is obviously really good. You have a Command Grab. You have Disable, which is really nice for calls. Your aerials are super nice. You have these massive dish shots. The kill power is pretty good. You have an up throw kill as well. Like, there's a lot of good things for Mewtwo, but you weigh 20 pounds and you're the size of an Empire State Building. Like, it just doesn't work. The next character is going to be Bowser Jr., and this is a character that straight up I've always had a lot of faith in. I've always thought Bowser Jr. was quite good. By that I mean, character is very bad, but relative to what people think, I thought he was quite good. Now, would I put him this high? No, I wouldn't. But I can kind of see the justifications. I think Mecha Koopa is a fairly underrated item. I just think having access to items is really good in Smash Ultimate. Bowser Jr.'s combo game is low-key ridiculous. He has some super solid kill confirms, as well as he's got a killing jab, which I heavily value, and it's one of the best killing jabs in the entire game. But the big issue with the character comes to, number one, I think he's just kind of clunky in the neutral. I don't love him in the neutral, but maybe I'm just bad at Bowser Jr. I feel like you rely a ton on side B, and also his recovery is just miserable. If you get clipped by literally any hitbox in the game, when you're out of your clown cart, you're just going to die, and it just adds another layer of inconsistency. Kind of the same thing to Mewtwo, where these characters have things going for them, but they're just too inconsistent to be put above characters who also have things going for them. Next up is going to be Villager. This is another character that is way too high, and I think it's pretty clear that Cody thinks fairly highly of the Animal Crossing characters, considering Villager is all the way up here, and Isabelle is in the BS tier with characters like Snake and Min Min and Hero and Pac-Man. Like, he's clearly got a bone to pick with these two, and I honestly can't blame him, but maybe giving them a little bit too much credit, at least with Villager. Now, I personally definitely think Villager is a better character than Isabelle. I just value Bowling Ball and Tree more than I value the Infinite and Fishing Rod, and if you want to value the other two, yeah, I don't really care. Both characters are bad regardless, so we could just shake hands. Some good things about Villager. I think Pocket is actually really good, especially in certain matchups. You're a nickel and dime character. You're just slowly whittling away at your opponent's stocks, kind of like 1,000 cuts, but the problem is most 1,000 cut characters, I'm thinking Sheik, I'm thinking Zersu, I'm thinking Pikachu, have amazing neutrals. Some of the best neutrals in the entire game. Villager is not at the benefit of that. Villager's neutral is, if you can't get in versus my slingshot, I'm going to keep doing that, and if you can get in versus the slingshot, he's still going to do it, but he's just going to lose. The character is extremely underwhelming when you're able to close the space. You are able to close the space as a majority of characters in the game, and even when Villager gets his hands on you and goes crazy, you're not taking more than like 40%. And there's a couple characters in this B tier that do have some pretty solid arguments for being an A tier. I think Young Link is one of them. I think Shulk is one of them. I think Pokemon Trainer is one of them. But there are only two characters that I think are definitely A tier, so I'm going to be talking about those ones. And the first one is going to be all the way at the end here in Sheik. Sheik is a character that every single day I think about Smash Ultimate and the metagame. She just gets better, in my opinion, because she has an amazing neutral, one of the best neutrals in the entire game. And if you are competent, you're doing like 60-70% in a hit. And even if you're incompetent, you still have one of the best neutrals in the game. You could just slowly whittle away at your opponent, and I mean very slowly, but if your kill confirms are on point, you only need to get your opponent to like 70-80% before you start getting down tilt into up smash, needles into up smash. Really just finding the up smash is going to be the key win condition, but there are so many ways to find the up smash. You also have amazing edge guarding. Needles is just a really broken tool. I feel like I have to hammer that point home, and obviously Sheik isn't too low on the skills. I actually think this is probably around where most people would put Sheik. I personally just think Sheik is absolutely broken, is going to continue getting better, and deserves to be in that A tier. Next up is going to be Terry, and I would definitely regard Terry in the A tier. And I think this is a character that you would honestly heavily undervalue if you've never seen a super top level Terry. You've never really played the character, because once you play Terry for like 3 games, that's all it really takes to learn him. You kind of figure out, oh, my jab does 40%. So does my down tilt. So does my up air. So does my nair. And then, oh, everything does 40%. And I kill at like 80% off of all of those moves that I just mentioned. And then I have Go Meter on top of that. Terry is a ridiculous character. And I'm honestly a little bit confused why he isn't more represented in the meta. Obviously, there are good Terry players. Aegis is pretty incredible. Riddle is still the GOAT with Terry, and Kazuya is just the better choice there. So I definitely get why he doesn't play the character a ton. But I think Terry is extremely underutilized. He just has such free damage output, such free killing. Everything about this character is pretty much free, and he's really good. Moving on to the A tier, the first character in the A tier that I think is wrong is Rosalina, but I think the community would tend to disagree with me on this one. I do not think Rosalina is a very good character. That's not true. I think she's an okay character, but the community at whole seems to honestly think super highly of Rosa. The reason that I don't value her as much as some other characters is just because she doesn't always have her resources with her. So Luma, the fact that you can lose that as a resource, I think is really bad. Well, you can have a character like Falco, like Corrin, like Wolf, who are just already better than Rosalina, but are always better than Rosalina. They always have the things about them that are good. Whereas Rosalina, maybe with Luma, is slightly better than Falco, slightly better than Wolf, even though that's not true. Those are just the examples. But she can lose that resource, which I think is really, really bad for her. But again, not a bad character. Her walling is really good. She's got some super oppressive things about her, and she has been getting better and better. So I'll let it slide. Next character I want to mention is Ness, and it's because I just straight up agree with this placement. I don't think a lot of people would. I think Ness is ridiculous. And by ridiculous, I mean right around here in this A tier. The damage output of this character is just obscene, and the killing is amazing as well. Now, Ness players are bad, so that's why you don't see Ness really get good results. And if you're a Ness player, you should take that personally, and you start working a little bit harder, honestly, because your character is really, really good. You just kind of get gimped, and then you give up. But a character that definitely shouldn't be here is going to be Wii Fit. But this is another character where, at a first glance, I can 1000% understand why Cody would heavily value Wii Fit, because deep breathing is a ridiculous mechanic. You get significantly stronger on all your stats. You're faster, you heal, which really doesn't matter, but it's just the cherry on top. You have a charge shot. You have a move like Soccer Ball, which hits from across the stage. Just a really annoying projectile to deal with that can be sent at so many different angles. You've got crazy kill confirms. Like, everything about Wii Fit when I'm talking about her seems really, really good, but when you don't have deep breathing, the character is significantly weaker. As I mentioned, I do heavily value characters that always have their resources, and it's not impossible for Wii Fit to get deep breathing. It's pretty easily, honestly, but most of the time she's either going to have to already be in the advantage state or force herself into the disadvantage state, which isn't the worst place in the world for Wii Fit to be, which is just another compliment of the character because of how Soccer Ball works. So I think this A tier placement, while wrong, is honestly pretty based, and I'm okay with it. Next characters I want to talk about are Palutena and Joker, and as I mentioned at the start of the video, Cody does not have a ton of experience in Smash Ultimate. All of this is based off the little insight he has playing the game and what he has seen on Twitter. So community at whole, this is your fault. You guys did this because these characters are not that bad. Joker is at least an S tier character, at least in my opinion. He is. Palutena should be somewhere in the top half of that A tier. These characters are so often downplayed for what is seemingly no reason. Like, yeah, that conversation, is Palutena or Incineroar better? Obviously, it's Palutena. Palutena, half of her moves are better than half the cats, and that's not even a bit. Dash attack, nair, back air, up air, and let's throw in back throw in there, even though we don't really need it. With those moves alone, Palutena is a better character than most in this game. Her buttons are just incredible. And do you know what? She can be a little bit linear when it comes to getting the stock, but that's just because people have played against Paula a lot and they know how she wants to get her kill. Palutena players, you have the tools at your disposal. You have confirms like drag down air and up tilt. Some reason people stop doing that. I don't know why. Maybe it doesn't work anymore. Maybe I'm just hiding, but you have up air, you have back air, you have a back throw, dash attack even starts killing. Like, you have so many strong kill moves that are, yes, difficult to hit because your opponent is aware, but just be creative. Look at Luis. He's throwing out these crazy smash attacks because he knows, hey, I have these really strong moves that people aren't ready for, so I'm going to utilize them. This character can kill. You're just being bad, and she has the tools to win in neutral pretty much every single time versus almost every character in the game. Extremely underrated. And it's the same thing with Joker. Joker is like a lot more convoluted. He has Gun, which is the best move in the game. Maybe not the best move in the game, but it's definitely in contention for the best move in the game. That is out of the question. You have Arsene, which is one of the best mechanics in the game. And on top of that, Joker is maybe the hardest character in the entire game to actually land a hit on. He's just so nimble, and when he runs, he gets so close to the ground that's really difficult to actually just beat him out in the neutral because you can't even get that opening. But these characters are good. They're downplayed a lot on Twitter. I don't quite understand. Obviously, these placements are atrocious by any means. They're still rated high, but they just be rated higher. I really quickly just want to mention Mii Brawler because I'm surprised at how good this placing is, considering that it's a Mii. Most people will look at them and just kind of shove them in this C tier right here. Most of the Ultimate community doesn't even get this placement right, so shouts to Cody for that one. But now let's move on to Chrom. I do think that Chrom is a little bit low here. The character just has so much going for him. Jab back air is arguably the best kill confirm in the entire game, and he's got a bunch of other solid kill confirms as well, which can lead into Chromicide, which even though Chrom does die first, you still have a stock trade where you can confirm into it. You can confirm into it if you have a stock lead, or if you're at like 120%, your opponent is just getting off the Halo platform. Actually, the game is even out, which is super solid. Chrom up at a shield is also ridiculous. Like, it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it does like 25%, where it's not even worth touching his shield at that point. He's also just such an impressive character on stage. You have things like jab back air, which are really scary. You just have raw back air itself. His juggling is amazing, and while his recovery is definitely a massive weak spot, there are characters with bad recoveries that are still good. Aegis is still good. Cloud is still good. Chrom is falling into that boat. This is a character that I would regard in the S tier. He has jab backer, which is just such a strong tool, and overall pretty underrated. The next character in the A tier that I want to talk about is actually going to be right next to Chrom from the same franchise, and that is going to be Robin. This is another character where if you've never played with them or against them, it makes a lot of sense why you would perceive them higher, just because Bronze Sword is really bad. Like, really bad. I feel like unless you play the character, you don't fully understand that, because Levin Sword is like ridiculous. If Robin always had Levin Sword, this placement would honestly be super justified, even with the character's mobility stats being as bad as they are. You are a character with really nice disjoints and a ton of projectiles at your disposal. You have a command grab as well, which you'll probably never get close enough to use it, but it is something that is nice. Robin has a lot of stuff going for them, but as I mentioned earlier on, you just don't always have your resources, and when a character is like that, unless they're Joker, because Joker has gun, I'm just going to heavily undervalue them. Maybe a little bit too much, but I just can't help it. It's just how I perceive the game. So I would move Robin down to this C tier, somewhere like probably in the middle half of it. Nothing crazy, but the character just without Levin Sword is bad. The next character that I want to talk about is Aegis, and this is the only character in the A tier that I would actually move up to the S tier. I should give an honorable mention to Peach as well, because I wouldn't move her up in this current S tier, but she is good enough to be in that conversation. But back to Aegis, obviously the character has a really big flaw in their recovery, but that is it. I'm pretty confident in saying that is the only flaw of Aegis as a character. Maybe you want Mithra to be a little bit lighter, but you have Mithra with one of, if not the best neutrals in the entire game. You have massive disjoints on all your moves, and pretty much every single move, if not every single move you have, is a combo tool, which is awesome. You have an amazing advantage state. You're just an amazing character. And then you could switch to Pyro when your opponent is in the disadvantage, or when your opponent is off stage, so you can less trap with Pyro. So there is never ever a situation where you are going to have to play Pyro where you're in neutral or when you're not favored, unless you willingly choose to, which I don't know why you would. In every other situation, you get to play Mithra, who is as fast as a race car. And I thought of a big weakness for the character that maybe isn't the recovery, and that's going to be the disadvantage. I don't think the disadvantage is honestly that bad because of how fast Mithra falls, and she has foresight, but if you want to include that, I'm not going to fight you super hard on it. I just think Mithra players, and I'm calling it Mithra players because you should be playing Mithra 90% of the time, really don't understand how this character works. They're still playing Power Mithra incorrectly, and once people figure out I'm just always going to play Mithra and then set up for a ledge trap all the time and then switch to Pyro and kill you at like 90, then the character is going to be really good. And before we get into the S tier, I realized there are two characters that I didn't touch on that I really quickly just want to do. So the first one is going to be Lucas. I would move Lucas to the bottom of this P tier, and I would move Ryu to the bottom of this A tier. And it's really not me having a problem with either character. I just think the characters that are below them are better than them. Like, I think pretty much every single character in this A tier, except for some of the obvious ones, are better than Ryu, and pretty much every single character in this B tier, except for the obvious ones, are better than Lucas. So I would move them down to the bottom half of their respective tiers, but they're still fine placements. And now we got the S tier. And this is by far Cody's best part of the tier list. Because Rob, even if he's a little low, he's in the right spot. Good job. Pikachu, in the right spot. Good job. Game Watch, in the exact right spot. Good job. Cloud, Fox, you just did a good job with all of these. And then you have these three characters. The first one is going to be Kazuya. I personally don't really care where you put Kazuya on a tier list because he kills you in one hit, but his neutral is really bad. So it really does just come down to what you value. This is an absolutely justifiable placement. Then you have Yoshi. Now, I don't know if Cody is on Japan Twitter. If he is on Japanese Twitter, then this placement makes a ton of sense. But even without that, Yoshi is still a good character. You have the double jump, which is something that only one character in this game has, which allows you to create, or rather escape, a ton of scenarios that no one else could get out of, which is awesome. You also have an amazing damage output. Your aerials, literally every single one of them, is ridiculous. Your killing is really good. Yoshi is a very, very good character. It's just another situation of there's characters in the A tier, a lot of characters in the A tier that I would value over Yoshi, but I'm not going to cry about this placement. I am going to cry about the Ice Climber placement, though, because this is the most polarizing character in Smash Ultimate. I say it every time I'm talking about Ice Climbers, and that's because, you know, it's true. When you are landing your combos, ridiculous character, because you're killing in one hit. You have so many ways to kill in one hit at so many percents, and I'm not exaggerating at all, and everyone knows that I'm not exaggerating. But then when you split up the climbers, you get significantly weaker. When you lose your resource, you get a lot weaker. And there's also just the problem of Ice Climbers matchup charts are miserable. And if you've never played Smash Ultimate or never looked at an Ice Climber matchup chart, which I don't know why he would, then that's not something that's really going to occur to you. But half of these matchups in the A, B, C tier are winning, and the other half are hard losing. And that's just kind of how the character is. But if you don't look at Ice Climber in terms of matchups, you just look at this character, which does a ton of damage, kills you in one hit, has some of the best shield pressure in the game, I can definitely understand why they would be this high. And also, he plays melee. Maybe he thinks they can wobble still. And our S+ tier characters are Sonic and Steve. I guess Steve and Sonic would be the correct order, so kind of boring to end it off, but it is correct. So good job to Cody on that one. He has the top 3 characters in the game in the correct order, which I can definitely appreciate. And just to wrap up the video, I want to show you all the tier list that I've made. Now, all of the characters in this tier list are in the same tiers that they were in Cody's tier list, but I just moved them in the order that I think is correct. And as you can see, for the most part, like, obviously, pretty much every character's moved just because of the intricacies, but for the most part, Cody Schwab did a very good job of this tier list, and especially considering that he did it pretty much blind, this is an amazing tier list. I think he got, like, 70% of the stuff just straight up right. Maybe 15% of the characters were just in the wrong place in their tier, and then the other 15% were just, like, wrong placements, but we all can't be perfect, and for doing pretty much blind tier list, this is honestly an amazing job from Cody Schwab. Now, would I do better on a melee tier list? I'm not saying that I for sure would, but who knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see. With that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. What has been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!